Admiral Zixtal's antennae twitched in mild irritation as another group of human officials led them through the endless corridors of the International Space Center. The Admiral had visited 17 space facilities across the galaxy this solar cycle alone, and they all started to blend together after a while. Gleaming walls, proud speeches about achievements, and the ever-present scent of artificial atmosphere processors. "And here we have our junior training wing," announced Director Chen, her voice carrying the same rehearsed enthusiasm as the rest of the tour. The Admiral's secondary eyes performed the equivalent of a polite blink, while their primary set remained fixed ahead, already anticipating the next meaningless stop on this diplomatic exercise. A sudden burst of alarms froze them mid-step. The sound came from behind a curved doorway, followed by a young voice calling out coordinates with surprising authority. The Admiral's protective instincts flared. Their species had evolved as colony defenders, after all, before recognizing the controlled nature of the chaos. Adjusting vector 37 degrees port. Compensating for gravitational interference. The voice belonged to a human child, female by their markings, seated before a wraparound holographic display. Her small hands danced across the control surfaces with practiced precision. Director Chen smiled at the Admiral's evident interest. "That's my daughter, Sarah. She's practicing for next week's junior qualification trials." The Admiral moved closer, their sensory ridges detecting subtle changes in air pressure as the simulation responded to the child's commands. The scenario playing out before them was no simple teaching exercise. It was a complex orbital insertion between two bodies with competing gravitational fields. Initiating primary burn in 3, 2, 1. Sarah's fingers spread across the thrust controls, making minute adjustments that the Admiral recognized from their own Academy days. The simulated ship's trajectory curved perfectly around the virtual planet's magnetosphere, using the interference that would have troubled most pilots as a natural brake. "Remarkable," the Admiral murmured, their translation unit struggling to convey the complex harmonics of surprise in their native tongue. "How long has she been training?" Sarah answered without taking her eyes off the display. "I started playing when I was 6. Mom got me the basic simulator package for my birthday." Her ship cleared the orbital insertion point with a margin of error that would have earned commendations in the Admiral's fleet. "Playing?" The Admiral's translator actually glitched on the word, requiring a restart. "This is a Class 4 spatial navigation scenario. We don't introduce these concepts until the 3rd year at our Naval Academy." Sarah's fingers danced again, correcting for a solar wind surge that would have sent a lesser pilot into an uncontrolled spin. "Really? But it's just like that old game Asteroids, except you have to account for real physics. Actually, this level is based on the Voyager 2 slingshot maneuver from way back. Pretty cool how they did that without computers, right?" The Admiral's primary eyes widened while their secondary set narrowed in concentration. They had reviewed the historical Voyager mission during their own command training. It had been presented as an example of remarkable computational achievement. Yet here was a human child, casually recreating the same principles while chatting about games. Director Chen's smile took on a knowing quality. "Perhaps you'd like to see our simulator development division next, Admiral." For the first time since arriving on Earth, Admiral Zixtal felt genuinely intrigued by what would come next. Admiral Zixtal found themselves returning to the junior training wing 3 days later, this time without the ceremonial escort. The large observation window offered a perfect view of what the humans called their gaming hub, though the Admiral was beginning to question the accuracy of that translation. Sarah sat in her usual spot, but today she wasn't alone. 5 other children, ranging in age from 10 to 14 Earth years, clustered around different simulation pods. Their casual chatter filled the room, punctuated by occasional bursts of laughter. "Target vessel is losing atmosphere," Sarah called out, her voice carrying the same calm authority the Admiral remembered. "Team 2, what's your approach vector?" A boy with curly hair responded immediately, his hands moving across his control panel. "Coming in from the shadow side. Less solar interference that way." Good thinking, Marcus. Sarah nodded, her eyes never leaving her display. Ava, can you calculate the rescue window? A younger girl with tight braids pulled up a holographic overlay. 7 minutes before their life support fails. But she paused, frowning at the data. There's something weird about their spin rate. The Admiral's antennae twitched in recognition. This was the Kelvin Ross incident, a disaster that had claimed 3 ships and nearly 200 lives 60 years ago. The unusual spin rate had been caused by a cascading systems failure that took 17 hours for the rescue crews to decode. Check the harmonics, Sarah suggested, already adjusting her ship's approach. Remember that weird level with the resonance patterns. Ava's eyes lit up. Oh, like the musical puzzle in Space Symphony, if we match their rotation. Her fingers flew across the interface, sending new calculations to the team's displays. The Admiral watched in stunned silence as the children coordinated their rescue attempt. Each movement was precise, each decision backed by solid spatial mathematics that they seemed to grasp instinctively. When Marcus suggested using the failing ship's own venting atmosphere as a makeshift course correction, the Admiral had to suppress a chirp of surprise. "That's it," Sarah exclaimed, her ship locking into perfect synchronization with the spinning target. "Ava, Marcus, take port and starboard. Jin and Kai, maintain our heat shield coverage. Maya, ready with the emergency docking tube." The 6 children executed their rescue plan with the kind of seamless coordination that reminded the Admiral of their own fleet's elite squadrons. The entire operation took 11 minutes. Director Chen appeared beside the Admiral, offering a steaming cup of what humans called coffee. Impressive, isn't it? They'd been working on crisis scenarios all week. How? The Admiral's translator took a moment to align their thoughts. How did they develop such advanced spatial awareness? Most of them started with simple tablet games as toddlers, Chen explained, watching as the children high-fived over their success. Building blocks in zero, orbital physics puzzles, that sort of thing. The games get more complex as they grow. By the time they reach the simulator stage, 3-dimensional thinking is second nature. Sarah's voice carried through the observation window again. "Okay, team, ready for something harder. I found this awesome scenario based on the Europa Station crisis." The Admiral's secondary eyes blinked rapidly. The Europa Station crisis had been one of their own command school's most challenging exercises. "Director Chen," they said carefully, "I believe I need to make some urgent communications with my superiors." The holographic displays in Admiral Zixtal's temporary Earth office flickered with centuries of human gaming history. Their research had started with simple 2-dimensional representations called Space War and Asteroids, primitive by modern standards, but revolutionary for their time. The Admiral's antennae curled in fascination as they traced the evolution of these games through the decades. "Computer, display the neural engagement patterns again," they commanded, studying the complex web of connections that formed when human children interacted with their simulations. The patterns pulsed and danced, each game creating new pathways in young minds. A gentle chime announced the arrival of their expected guest. Dr. Patel, Earth's leading expert in educational neuroscience, entered with a tablet tucked under her arm. "I brought those studies you requested, Admiral. Though I'm curious why the Galactic Fleet is suddenly interested in children's games." The Admiral gestured to the largest display, where footage from Sarah's latest training session played alongside a real space rescue operation. The movements were nearly identical. "Because, Doctor, I don't believe these are just games anymore." Dr. Patel smiled, settling into a chair designed to accommodate various alien physiologies. "They never were. Take the Kerbal Space Program series from the 21st century. Children learned rocket science through trial and error, building virtual spacecraft, and watching them succeed or explode. It was entertaining, but it also taught them about thrust ratios, delta calculations, and orbital mechanics." The Admiral's secondary eyes narrowed. "But these modern simulators, The accuracy is unprecedented. The physics models alone would take years to master. That's where you're wrong, Dr. Paddle said, pulling up additional data on her tablet. Children don't see physics equations or mathematical models. They see patterns, puzzles, and challenges. Watch this. She played a recording of Sarah's class attempting a new scenario, navigating through a complex field of stellar debris while managing failing ship systems. The children called out to each other in their casual way, using terms like "that level with the spinning rocks" or "remember the power management puzzle from stellar survival." They're building on patterns they've internalized through years of play. Dr. Paddle explained. By the time they encounter real spaceflight concepts, the foundational understanding is already there. They don't need to learn the math because they've already developed an intuitive grasp of the principles. The Admiral's antennae twitched as they processed this information. In our academies, cadets spend years memorizing formulae and procedures before touching a simulator. And how many of your cadets could solve the Jovian gravity well challenge? Dr. Patel asked, referencing a notoriously difficult navigation problem. Before the Admiral could respond, a notification flashed across their display. Sarah's class had just completed the challenge during their morning session. Time: 17 minutes. Previous record: 3 hours. You understand now, don't you? Dr. Patel's voice held a hint of pride. While the rest of the galaxy was teaching spaceflight, we were teaching our children to play among the stars. They don't just know the rules of space, they dance with them. The Admiral's translator struggled to find the right words for their response. Finally, it simply output. Remarkable. The Global Youth Space Challenge transformed the Singapore Space Center's main hall into a sea of holographic displays. Admiral Zixtel stood at the observation deck, their secondary eyes scanning the hundreds of young competitors, while their primary set remained fixed on Sarah's station. Final round preparations complete, announced the event coordinator. Competitors, please initialize your systems. Sarah sat calmly at her console, surrounded by the soft blue glow of her holographic controls. The Admiral noticed she had personalized her interface with small modifications, shortcuts, and custom command clusters that reflected hours of practice and refinement. This year's championship scenario will begin in 5 minutes, the coordinator continued. Remember, you will be evaluated not only on success, but on efficiency, resource management, and crew safety. Director Chen appeared beside the Admiral, her usual confident expression tinged with parental concern. Sarah's been practicing for months, but this scenario is completely new. None of them know what to expect. The Admiral's antennae twitched as the main display revealed the challenge. A massive solar storm was approaching a research station. 3 transport ships needed evacuation, but the storm's electromagnetic interference made traditional approaches impossible. The Admiral recognized the scenario. It was based on an actual incident that had claimed 2 ships before a solution was found. The young competitors sprang into action. Most immediately began calculating safe retreat vectors, planning to wait out the storm at a distance. A sensible approach, the Admiral thought, but one that would cost precious time and resources. Sarah, however, did something unexpected. She pulled up a secondary display showing the storm's electromagnetic pattern, her fingers dancing across the interface as she mapped its fluctuations. "Look at that," Director Chen whispered. "She's treating the storm like the rhythm patterns in that music game she loves." The Admiral's translator struggled to process their surprise as Sarah began maneuvering her rescue ships in what appeared to be a synchronized dance with the solar flares. Instead of fighting the electromagnetic interference, she was using it to create protective corridors. "It's just like conducting an orchestra," Sarah explained to her neighboring competitor, who had paused to watch her unusual approach. "The solar flares follow patterns, like music, if you time your movements to the rhythm." Her first transport ship slipped through the storm's outer layer unscathed, riding the electromagnetic waves like a surfer on Earth's oceans. The second and third followed in precise formation, each movement timed to the storm's pulsing energy. The Admiral's antennae curled in astonishment as they checked the time. 4 minutes and 13 seconds. The previous record for this scenario, set by an experienced rescue crew during the actual incident, was 27 minutes. "She's done it again," Director Chen said softly, watching as her daughter guided the last ship to safety. Found music in the mathematics. The Admiral's translator paused for a full second before finding the right words. "Director, your daughter hasn't just solved this scenario. She's revolutionized our understanding of solar storm navigation. That rhythm she identified. It could change how we approach stellar interference patterns entirely." Sarah, unaware of the significance of her achievement, simply smiled and began powering down her console. To her, it had just been another puzzle to solve, another game to play. But the Admiral knew better. This was the moment they would later mark as the beginning of a new era in space exploration. The award ceremony was interrupted by the harsh blare of emergency alarms. Red warning lights pulsed across the Singapore Space Center's main hall as the facility's AI announced. "Priority alert. Research Station Galileo requesting immediate assistance. Multiple critical systems failing." Admiral Zixtal watched as the celebration transformed into organized chaos. The holographic displays, moments ago showing competition results, now displayed real-time data from Jupiter's orbital space. The research station's position flickered between Io and Europa, caught in an unstable gravitational dance. "Station maintaining emergency power," reported Mission Control's chief operator, "but they're being pulled into a complex orbital interaction between the moons. Standard approach vectors are impossible due to the gravitational interference." Sarah, still holding her championship trophy, drifted closer to the main display. Her eyes tracked the station's erratic movement pattern, head slightly tilted in concentration. The Admiral noticed her fingers moving subtly, as if working invisible controls. "Director Chen," the Admiral said quietly, "your daughter appears to recognize something." Before Chen could respond, Sarah spoke up. "It's like the three-body problem from Stellar Mechanics Simulator." Her voice carried clearly across the now silent hall. "The gravitational interactions create a predictable pattern if you map them in 3 dimensions." The mission controller turned, clearly ready to dismiss the child's input, but the Admiral stepped forward. "Explain further, Sarah." Sarah handed her trophy to her mother and approached the main display. "May I?" At the controller's hesitant nod, she expanded the holographic model. "Look, the station's current path seems chaotic, but it's actually moving through recurring gravitational sweet spots. We practiced something similar in training." The Admiral's antennae twitched as they recognized the pattern. The Lagrange point paradox scenario. "Exactly." Sarah's fingers danced across the interface, highlighting invisible corridors between the competing gravitational fields. "In the game, we learned to surf these points to save fuel. But here, we can use them to create a stable rescue approach." The mission controller frowned. "This is hardly a game, young lady. We have 23 lives at stake." "Run the numbers," the Admiral interrupted, their translator barely keeping up with their excited harmonics. "Compare her approach vector with standard rescue protocols." Screens flickered as the Space Center's AI processed the calculations. Green confirmation lights filled the display as success probability scrolled past. 89.7%, 92.3%, 94.1%. The controller stared at the results. This could work. But the timing would need to be perfect, the smallest miscalculation. Sarah pointed to a pulsing point in the holographic model. "That's our window. The station will pass through this gravitational null point in exactly 17 minutes. If we launch now, we can match velocities using minimal fuel and stabilize their orbit." Director Chen stepped forward, placing a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Those are lives out there, Sarah. Are you sure about this?" Sarah nodded, her competition nervousness replaced by calm certainty. "It's just like the simulator, Mom. Only this time, it matters." The Admiral watched as the mission controller made the call. Within minutes, rescue ships were launching, following the path that a 12-year-old girl had mapped through one of the solar system's most complex gravitational fields. Theory was about to become reality, and the Admiral couldn't help but wonder how many other solutions were hiding in humanity's games. Admiral Sixtel stood before the Galactic Education Council, their antennae quivering with barely contained excitement as the holographic displays showed the successful rescue of Research Station Galileo. The council members, representing 17 spacefaring species, watched in silence as Sarah's solution played out in perfect detail. This was not an isolated incident, the Admiral explained, switching the display to show the Singapore Space Center's training room. Observe these young humans during their normal practice sessions. The footage showed Sarah and her friends tackling increasingly complex scenarios, their casual banter and excited celebrations contrasting sharply with the sophisticated maneuvers they executed. A young Centaurian council member leaned forward, their crystalline structure catching the light. These children appear to be enjoying themselves, they noted, the concept clearly foreign to their understanding of education. Precisely, the Admiral replied, their translator harmonizing with enthusiasm. Humans have transformed their training methodology into an engaging experience. Their children master concepts through immersion and play that our academies struggle to teach in decades. The display shifted to a split screen. On one side, a traditional alien academy, with students memorizing spatial equations. On the other, human children collaborating on a complex rescue scenario while sharing snacks and laughing. We have already implemented a pilot program, the Admiral continued, bringing up new data. 3 lunar cycles ago, we introduced human-designed simulators to a test group of young learners on New Centauri. The results appeared in vibrant detail. Spatial reasoning improvements of 300%, problem-solving efficiency increased by 275%, and most surprisingly, a 400% increase in voluntary participation in advanced training programs. Sarah appeared on the main screen, now conducting a virtual classroom with alien students across 5 star systems. Remember, her voice rang clear through the council chamber. Space isn't just about math and physics. It's about finding the rhythm, feeling the flow of gravitational fields, and dancing with the stars themselves. A young Proximan student in the video raised their appendage, like in that asteroid field game you showed us, where we had to match the orbital patterns. Exactly. Sarah beamed. Now, who wants to try the solar sail challenge? I found this really cool way to use radiation pressure. The Admiral watched as the council members' body language shifted from skepticism to interest. Even the traditionally stoic Rigelians showed signs of engagement. There is more, the Admiral added, bringing up another display. The human children have begun creating their own scenarios, based on their unique perspectives. They are not merely solving our existing problems. They are discovering new approaches we never considered. The chamber filled with murmurs as the council witnessed a simulation designed by Sarah's team. A complex rescue operation that used solar wind patterns in ways that defied conventional spacefaring wisdom. We stand at a crossroads, the Admiral concluded, their antennae stretched tall with conviction. We can maintain our traditional methods, or we can embrace this human innovation. These children have shown us that learning need not be a burden. They have turned the greatest challenges of space exploration into a joyful dance among the stars. The council chamber fell silent as the final images faded. Sarah and her diverse group of alien students, all focused intently on their simulators, all smiling, all learning, all growing together in ways that transcended species and culture. The Singapore Space Center's main control room buzzed with tension as representatives from 12 species studied the strange radiation patterns blocking the Orion Transit Corridor. 3 months of conventional analysis had yielded no solution, and the growing crisis threatened to shut down trade routes across multiple sectors. Admiral Zixtal observed from their customary spot near the holoprojector, where Sarah and her now interspecies team of young space cadets huddled around their simulation stations. The team had grown since the Galileo incident, now including a young Proximan who floated in their containment sphere, 2 Centaurian crystals pulsing with thoughts, and a Rigelian whose ever-shifting form sparkled with curiosity. "The pattern keeps changing," the Proximan cadet, Prevail, announced, their translation unit converting soft light pulses into speech. "Standard prediction models fail after 7 minutes." Sarah nodded, her fingers dancing across her customized interface. "But there's something familiar about it." "Zara, remember that puzzle sequence from last week's training?" The younger Centaurian crystal brightened. "The quantum resonance exercise, where we had to match the frequency shifts." "Look at this." Sarah expanded the radiation wave pattern across the main display. "It's not random. There's a rhythm to it, just like in the exercise." The Admiral's antennae twitched as they recognized what the children were suggesting. "You believe this spatial anomaly follows similar principles to your training scenarios?" "Not exactly like them." The Rigelian cadet, Kix, shifted colors thoughtfully. "But the underlying logic is similar. In the quantum puzzle, we learned that some patterns only make sense when you view them from multiple dimensions simultaneously." Sarah's eyes lit up. "That's it. We're trying to map this in 3-dimensional space, but what if we add time as a 4th dimension? Computer, please display temporal overlay of radiation patterns for the past 3 months." The holographic display transformed, showing the radiation waves as a complex 4-dimensional dance through space-time. The adult specialists in the room stared in confusion at the seemingly chaotic display, but the young cadets leaned forward with growing excitement. "There!" Veil's containment sphere pulsed brightly. "The pattern repeats every 17 minutes and 33 seconds, but it's shifted across both space and time." Sarah was already adjusting her simulator controls. "If we time our ship's movements to match these intervals, we could surf the safe zones between radiation peaks." Zora completed the thought, her crystalline structure resonating with enthusiasm. The Admiral watched in amazement as the young team worked together, each species contributing their unique perspective to the solution. The Proximan's natural understanding of light waves, the Centaurian's crystalline computational ability, the Rigelian's multidimensional thinking, and Sarah's human talent for finding patterns in chaos, all blending seamlessly. "Ships entering transit corridor in 7 minutes," the traffic control AI announced. Director Chen stepped forward. "Sarah, are you certain about this?" Sarah looked around at her alien teammates, receiving encouraging gestures from each. "Remember what you always say, Mom. Space isn't just about knowing the rules. It's about understanding the dance. We'd found the rhythm of this one." The Admiral's translator struggled to capture the complex harmonics of pride in their voice as they gave the order. "Implement their solution. Let's show the galaxy how the next generation dances among the stars." The Interstellar Youth Space Academy's grand opening drew delegates from 27 spacefaring civilizations. Admiral Zixtel stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed facility, orbiting Earth's moon, their antennae swaying gently in appreciation of how far they had come from that first chance encounter in a training room. Sarah, now 14, adjusted her instructor's uniform as she prepared to demonstrate the Academy's flagship training program. Her original team had expanded into a diverse group of 40 young beings from across the galaxy, each bringing their own unique perspectives to space exploration. "Ready for the demonstration?" the Admiral asked, their translator now perfectly calibrated to convey the warm familiarity they had developed. "Almost," Sarah smiled, making final adjustments to the massive holographic arena that dominated the Academy's central chamber. "Veil and Zara are just finishing the new stellar navigation module we designed." The demonstration area came alive with swirling cosmic phenomena. Neutron stars, black holes, quantum anomalies, and complex gravitational fields. But unlike traditional simulations, these celestial objects pulsed with music, their movements creating harmonies that could be both seen and heard. "We call it the Symphony of Stars," Sarah explained to the assembled dignitaries. "Each celestial phenomenon has its own rhythm, its own song. Once you learn to hear it, navigation becomes almost intuitive." The Admiral watched as Sarah's students took their positions. Young Proximans glowed with excitement in their containment spheres. Centaurian crystals sparkled with anticipation. Regelians shifted through rainbow hues, and humans adjusted their controls with practiced ease. "Begin demonstration sequence," Sarah announced, and the chamber transformed into a cosmic orchestra. Ships piloted by the young cadets wove through impossible spaces, riding gravitational waves like solar surfers. A Proximan human team demonstrated a new method of quantum slitstream navigation, while a Centaurian Regelian pair showcased revolutionary techniques for mapping 11-dimensional space. "They're not just learning," Director Chen whispered to the Admiral. "They're creating entirely new ways of understanding space travel." The Admiral's secondary eyes caught sight of a small group of senior specialists furiously taking notes as a 12-year-old Regelian explained their theory of temporal wave harmonics. The scene would have been unthinkable just 2 years ago. As the demonstration reached its final, Sarah gathered her students at the center of the arena. Space exploration isn't just about reaching new planets or mapping new stars, she addressed the audience. It's about bringing different perspectives together, about learning to see the universe through each other's eyes. The Admiral stepped forward, their antennae held high with pride. "When I first encountered a human child playing what I thought was a simple game, I could not have imagined where that discovery would lead. Today, we do not just train space explorers, we nurture the dreamers who will reshape our understanding of the cosmos." The chamber erupted in appreciation as the young cadets launched into their final demonstration. A synchronized dance of ships and skills that transformed the complexities of space travel into a beautiful ballet of light and motion. Sarah caught the Admiral's eye and smiled. No words needed to be exchanged. They both knew that this was just the beginning. Somewhere out in the vast cosmos, new mysteries waited to be unraveled by young minds who saw space not as a cold, empty void, but as a playground among the stars.